Avatar is the biggest movie ever made, but you've never seen the real story. Over an hour of deleted scenes reveal shocking twists, including Norm and Trudy hooking up, Jake dueling Sute for Neytiri, and even Quaritch staging a military coup. This isn't the Avatar you remember. It's the Avatar they didn't want you to see. Let's get started. First up is Stingbat Attack. Over a minute long, this takes place right after Jake arrives at Hell's Gate during his first day on Pandora. As he wheels through the base, a small, aggressive predator called a stingbat suddenly swoops into the compound. Before Jake can process what is happening, Corporal Lyle Wainfleet steps in, raises his pistol, and shoots the stingbat. The creature drops to the ground, dead. Jake, still disoriented from his arrival, gets a violent introduction to life on Pandora. This helps establish how hostile the relationship between life on Pandora and the humans is. It introduces Wainfleet, one of Quaritch's men, as a trigger-happy grunt, someone who reacts first and thinks later, and it subtly highlights Jake's vulnerability in human form. It also brings to mind Quaritch's later line about how everything that crawls, flies, or squats in the mud wants to kill you. Next up is Pandora Rules, a brief scene that takes place immediately after Colonel Quaritch's welcome briefing. In the original, we hear Quaritch warn the new arrivals that, "You are not in Kansas anymore, but here we see more." Quaritch lays out the basics for survival in an old-school safety briefing. Rule number 1, always keep your exopack within reach. Number 2, keep your dog tags on your person. And number 3, the dead meat ticket should indicate which god, if any, should be prayed to in the event that rules are not followed and you die. This scene hammers home 2 points. Pandora is a dangerous place, and Quaritch is a hardline military leader. Now, a key relationship for these amazing movies: Jake meets Norm. This scene runs for just under a minute and expands on Jake's introduction to Norm Spellman inside the base at Hell's Gate. In the final cut, we only get a brief, awkward exchange between them, but this extended version adds more depth. We see Norm greet Jake and console him on the loss of his brother, while stating how alike they look. We also get a slightly longer look at the science team's environment, and we see some of Jake's initial defensiveness as he's thrust into this new, unfamiliar world. The fourth scene is entitled Jake Sees Decanted Avatars, and it lasts around 30 seconds and picks up immediately after Jake and Norm's first meeting. We see workers in the lab hosing down the containers that house the avatar bodies, along with 2 avatars stretched out on beds, having been decanted from the containers. Jake is watching on in amazement. Grace Augustine then enters the room and interrupts Jake and Norm, telling them to follow her so they can get to work. They follow Grace into the link room, where Grace asks Norm how much link time he has logged. 520 hours is the answer, obviously a lot more than Jake's 0 hours. This extra footage shows more of the science behind the Avatar program and gives us a little extra personal moment for Jake. Norm is a living god. This next scene is a short but funny moment, running for about 30 seconds and showcasing a more relaxed side of Hell's Gate. Jake is taking his first steps on Pandoran soil in his avatar body. Norm appears and we see him flex his muscles in a Usain Bolt pose and proclaim, "I am a living god." He's joking around and gets his comeuppance almost immediately when he falls over. Jake shakes his head and Grace laughs out loud. Next is Breakfast with the Scientists. This shows Jake having joined breakfast with Grace and her team of scientists. Jake sits there observing at the end of the table. Then Trudy comes to introduce herself and collect Jake because Colonel Quaritch wants to see him. Grace watches with interest as Jake leaves with Trudy, presumably concerned about her new team member and Quaritch's keen interest in him. We will see more of Trudy later. You're in my world now comes next. After Quaritch walks away from Jake in his AMP suit, we cut to Jake and Norm preparing to enter their avatars. Grace asks Jake what Quaritch wanted, and Jake replies, "Just Marines comparing tattoos." This irritates Grace. She scolds Jake, reminding him that he's in her world now. Grace proceeds to voice her disdain for Quaritch and the Marines, who ruined her team's chance to earn the Na'vi's trust. However, she hasn't lost hope. She introduces Norm and praises him as the best person to rebuild that trust. As Jake gets into the link unit, Grace tells him to keep quiet with the Na'vi and let Norm do the talking. The title and content of this scene imply that Pandora is Grace's domain of expertise. By guiding Jake and Norm through moments like this, she also establishes herself as both mentor and protector, which makes her death later all the more impactful. A change of pace with 𝐏𝐚𝐬𝐧𝐞𝐝. This takes place after Moat entrusts Neytiri with teaching Jake the ways of the clan. Neytiri brings Jake to the clan's dinner. Jake squats down and asks Neytiri's name. She tells him her name and teaches Jake how to say it. But in a lighter moment, Jake completely fails to pronounce it correctly. Unbeknownst to Jake, those around him speak poorly of him in the Na'vi language. Nevertheless, he joins in and eats the food Neytiri gave him, only for her to reveal that it's a type of larva called telu. Although slightly taken aback, Jake still wants to impress Neytiri, so he says, "That's some damn fine telu. It's like Grandma's telu." Neytiri then smiles and gives him more. This wholesome moment turns a shared meal into a step toward trust, and we see Jake with the 𝐿 again in Pied Piper. The scene shows that Grace still doesn't completely trust Jake. Before he enters the program, she warns him not to do anything unusually stupid, but this is at least more playful than previous conversations between them. We then cut to Jake in his Na'vi body, walking through the forest. Behind him, a group of Na'vi children follows. They giggle, tug his tail, and playfully tease him. In this moment, Jake is like the famous Pied Piper of Hamelin, hence the title. Jake reacts by spinning around and pretending to scare them. While Grace still has her doubts about him, he easily wins over the Na'vi children with his playful, genuine nature. Suddenly, Neytiri arrives with dire horses, wanting to take Jake on a ride. Going to the mountains is where we really start to see more of Norm versus what appeared in the theatrical cut. As soon as Grace announces that they're heading to the Hallelujah Mountains, Norm can't hide his excitement. He unleashes his quirky self, dances around, and teases the lab team members who aren't coming along. On the helicopter ride to their destination, Norm shows off his knowledge of the controls to Trudy. At one point, he even places his hand on the control stick while Trudy is still holding it, prompting her to give him a quick lesson on flying. The moment carries a hint of flirtation as their hands touch. In the theatrical cut of the movie, Norm and Trudy's relationship isn't explored fully. But here we get the first glimpse of their deeper connection, adding an extra layer of charm and depth to both, and the hint of a romantic storyline that was never shown to us. As they approach the majestic arches and the helicopter enters the flux vortex, the instrument panel is thrown into chaos. Trudy calmly explains that from this point on, it's VFR, or visual flight rules, meaning they'll have to rely on sight and instinct rather than the instruments. This foreshadows the difficulty Quaritch's airships will have later and why the floating mountains are the chosen spot for the final air battle. Our 11th deleted scene is interspecies booty call. After Grace sets up the new operating base, she asks Norm to operate Jake's link. Norm clearly disapproves, voicing his frustration that he trained for 3 years to take on this mission. Meanwhile, Jake, a complete novice, gets the opportunity instead. Grace calmly explains that the decision isn't theirs to make, but Norm is still upset. He sulks and bitterly refers to Jake's work as an interspecies booty call before storming off. Grace simply turns to Jake, shrugs off the tension, and helps him begin the link. Again, this is a level of depth to Norm's character that we haven't seen, and we're pretty glad that Jake and Norm remain on good terms throughout the official films instead. But the downturn in Norm's mood doesn't last long as we get to Norm's attitude improves. This sequence is presented as a montage during Jake's training to become a Na'vi, narrated through his video diary. It begins with Neytiri teaching him how to use a bow and arrow. Jake notes that she keeps calling him Skong, which translates to moron. The scene then cuts to Grace doing a little inspection of the local flora, and Jake waking up from the link unit. As he wheels himself around the cabin, he shockingly finds Norm and Trudy in bed together. They notice him, but they simply laugh it off and hide under the blanket. In the narration, Jake mentions that Norm's attitude seems to have improved. We shift again, this time to Norm and Jake looking serious during training. Jake is trying, but struggling, to learn the Na'vi language. He remarks that Norm probably thinks he's a moron too. Again, this one highlights just how much more Norm and Trudy develop as characters in these additional scenes. Although in the previous scene he was uptight and bitter, here he's able to loosen up. He mends his bond with Jake while deepening his connection with Trudy. And we have got to say we'd have loved to see more of the couple together. Back to the Na'vi training and learning montage early cut. This sequence runs for around 3 minutes. After Jake falls clumsily to the forest floor, we cut to him looking at old photos of Grace teaching the Na'vi children. We then see Norm introducing himself to Moat in the Na'vi language, with Grace standing beside him. Impressed, Moat praises Norm's fluency, while Jake's narration adds that he persuaded Moat to get Norm and Grace the meeting. The scene then shifts to Grace enthusiastically interacting with the Na'vi children, teaching them how to count in English. The montage continues with Neytiri showing Jake how to read the trails. They eventually reach a watering hole with a herd of sternbeast bathing. 𝐏𝐚𝐬𝐧 really did put so much thought into the nature of Pandora. After that, Neytiri leads Jake through the forest and cryptically tells Jake, "When you see nothing, you see everything." Jake narrates that sometimes he has no idea what she's talking about. The two creep silently through the forest until they spot a 𝐏𝐻𝐻𝐸. Jake prepares his bow and arrow, but Neytiri stops him. Jake reveals that even after 2 months of training, Neytiri still doesn't allow him to kill because, according to her, the forest has not yet permitted it. Jake doesn't yet subscribe to the notion of 𝐿, calling it tree hugger crap instead. Deleted scene 14 is We're buying time. We're with Trudy, Norm, Grace, and Jake. Grace is shown explaining the flux vortex, noting her desire to collect samples from the area. However, outsiders are strictly forbidden there. Then we see Grace and Norm conducting studies outside. Meanwhile, inside, Jake secretly downloads data on the Well of Souls, copying them onto a drive. Behind him, Trudy is casually doing a headstand, but she alerts Jake when she notices Grace and Norm returning. She says to Jake, "If we don't give him something, he's gonna shut us down." Just as they step into the airlock, Jake finishes the download. He pulls out the chip and, after a moment's hesitation, hands it to Trudy. She reassures him that it's only to buy time, reminding him that Selfridge will shut them down unless they give him something. Grace and Norm then enter the room, while Jake and Trudy act like nothing happened. Before leaving, Trudy gives Jake an intense look, as if acknowledging the weight of what they're doing. Jake is clearly a reluctant informant for Quaritch at this stage, and we can see the weight of his actions in his expression. A long deleted scene is Hunt Festival. This scene runs almost 5 minutes. It begins with Jake successfully hunting a sturmbeast with bow and arrow on the back of his 𝐿𝐴𝐻𝐻𝐸, followed by him and Neytiri shouting in triumph. The next thing we know, the whole clan is holding a festival at night. They dance and celebrate around a campfire. Some of the adults, including Norm, gather around as Jake tells a story in the 𝐼𝐵 language. They laugh and celebrate with him. Suddenly, 𝐶𝐈 shows up and challenges Jake to drink a 𝐼𝐵 concoction. Jake is shocked by how strong the drink is, but as soon as he sees 𝐶𝐈 smirk, he doesn't hesitate and chugs the whole thing as some chant his name. Jake manages to finish the whole thing, only for 𝐶𝐈 to challenge him to round 2. He looks at Grace, who gestures for him not to, but he ignores her. The crowd cheers again. Norm tries to take a sip, but Grace grabs the cup off him, saying it'll knock him into next week. But then she goes ahead and drinks it herself. When they're out of drink, the people drift back to the dancing circle, leaving Jake with 𝐶𝐈. 𝐶𝐈 jokes that he thought Jake wouldn't look so ugly with enough drink, but then he turns serious. He says he never thought sky people could be brave, since they always hide behind machines and fight from a distance. This is a softer side of 𝐶𝐈. Suddenly, Neytiri pulls Jake into the dance and Jake pulls Grace along too. They dance in pairs with Jake and Neytiri moving together. 𝐶𝐈 watches with jealousy. Moat also notices the spark between Jake and Neytiri. However, she disapproves of their relationship since Neytiri is already promised to 𝐶𝐈. This scene adds so much to the story. It's rare to see 𝐶𝐈 willingly interact with Jake, and we learn a lot about how the 𝐼𝐵 view arranged relationships too, as well as their celebration rituals. Next up is driving range. Jake is recording a video diary, admitting that he's struggling with an identity crisis. Afterwards, he and Grace visit Parker Selfridge during his golfing session. Selfridge greets them and immediately rambles about golf, but Jake interrupts, asking if he actually wants to hear their report. Caught off guard by Jake's bluntness, Selfridge pauses before letting them speak. Grace explains that they need more time, reminding him that the land is the 𝐼𝐵's ancestral home and that they have lived there long before human history. But Selfridge refuses to hear her excuse. He makes it clear that he can't delay any longer. Then he walks off. Grace hurries after him, still trying to reason with him, while Jake remains behind, clearly fearing what this all means. The Dream Hunt. This might be the longest deleted scene on the list, running over 8 minutes. It begins with Grace warning Jake not to take part in the dream hunt because even 𝐼𝐵 sometimes die during the ritual. She insists that Jake is still human and can never truly be one of them, that he can never truly be with Neytiri. However, Jake refuses to listen. As Norm prepares to start the program, Jake confesses that Quaritch originally sent him to infiltrate the 𝐿𝐴𝐻𝐻𝐸 and drive them from their home. But now, he no longer wants to follow through. The dilemma. If he tells Quaritch the truth, he'll be cut off and lose Neytiri forever. If he tells the clan, they might kill him. Nevertheless, Jake lies down and enters the link. Then Grace abruptly decides to join him as well. Then we are present at the sacred ceremony. The 𝐿𝐴𝐻𝐻𝐸 form a circle, and Jake steps inside. Moat blows smoke into his face and begins chanting before placing a worm into his mouth. After that, 𝐴𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐾 pulls out some kind of a scorpion and lets it sting Jake. Jake begins to weaken. His vision blurs, and he begins to hallucinate. On screen, this lasts for around a minute until his mind enters an out-of-body state. At the height of the vision, Jake sees himself standing at a cliff's edge as the great Leonopteryx, also known as Toruk, swoops down on him. He's in the eye of the great winged beast gliding over a forest which is burned to ash. Later in the morning, he wakes up in panic, gasping for air as Moat declares that the dream hunt has ended. Dream hunt is a deeply spiritual scene. Jake found his link to the Toruk in it, perhaps as a spirit animal for the upcoming fight to prevent the destruction of the forest. This scene sheds further light on James Cameron's view of spirituality in other cultures. Scene 18 is The Challenge. This 6-minute scene takes place right after Neytiri and Jake mate in front of 𝐿. When they return, 𝐶𝐚 is furious that Jake has been with Neytiri, the woman promised to him. Moat also voices her disappointment in Neytiri, warning that if she chooses Jake, she cannot become 𝐶𝐚. 𝐶𝐚 then tries to attack Jake without warning, but Jake dodges and 𝐴𝐿 stops him, saying it isn't a proper challenge. So 𝐶𝐚 formally declares a challenge, and Jake accepts, comedically ignoring Grace again as she tells him not to. Meanwhile, Trudy is flying Quaritch to Grace's camp. She subtly gives Norm, codename 𝐉𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐽, a heads up of their imminent arrival. Quaritch immediately and angrily cuts the communication off, preventing Trudy from contacting Norm any further, but Norm now knows what's coming. As Jake and 𝐶𝐚 duel with giant wooden weapons, and Jake is fighting valiantly, Quaritch and his men storm the camp. Norm panics. Jake gains the upper hand against 𝐶𝐚, but at the same moment, Quaritch barges in and disconnects both Jake and Grace from their avatars, making their avatar bodies fall lifeless and limp to the ground. 𝐶𝐚 then prepares to kill the unconscious Jake, but Neytiri stops him. He walks away with his followers. Back at the camp, Quaritch punches Jake before ordering that Jake, Grace, and Norm be taken into custody. Later at Hell's Gate, Quaritch shows Jake the footage of him attacking the bulldozer. In the final cut, we never actually see a proper fight between 𝐶𝐚 and Jake. This deleted scene fills that gap, giving us much more of the rivalry that had been brewing. It also gives a lot more color to Quaritch learning about the trio's plotting against him. Quaritch discovers what Jake confessed in his video diary and plays it back to him. 𝐿𝐹𝐺 now knows that a deal cannot be made with the Na'vi, so he declares that the Avatar program is being shut down. The scene cuts to the Na'vi attacking the bulldozers, setting them ablaze in a beautifully shot set piece. Cut again to Quaritch's men inspect the site and find 6 dead soldiers and all the machinery destroyed. Both Quaritch and 𝐿𝐹𝐺 are stunned by the devastation. In a private conversation, Quaritch suggests using gas to drive the Na'vi out so that there are minimal casualties to the indigenous, calling it the humane option, more or less. He adds that this incident is exactly the justification they needed, and 𝐿𝐹𝐺 agrees. Meanwhile, as the scientists pack their things, Grace, Jake, and Norm discuss what just happened. Grace realizes the bulldozers were sent there deliberately to provoke a conflict. Jake laughs wryly and agrees. Suddenly, Trudy rushes in to warn them that Quaritch is preparing to strike the home tree immediately. Next up is escape. While Grace, Jake, and Norm are confined, Trudy enters their room pretending to deliver food and insults them as tree-hugging traitors. But then, she suddenly pulls out a gun, presses it to the guard's head, and knocks him out. She quickly calls Max, getting him to open the door. Suddenly, the elevator opens. Trudy immediately takes down the soldier who steps out and ties his hands. It's a real treat to see Michelle Rodriguez in action like this, just like in the Fast and Furious franchise. Meanwhile, the guard she knocked out starts to get back up, but Max reacts fast by smashing a coffee pot over his head. With the guards out of the way, Max opens the door. Grace, Jake, Norm, and Trudy then head to the airship. As Jake steps into the airlock, he asks Max to stay put. Norm and Trudy soon reach the helicopter. Trudy starts the engine, but a Marine approaches and orders them to shut it down and step out. She reluctantly does as he says. She considers reaching for her gun, but the soldier notices and forces her to raise her hands instead. At that moment, Jake and Grace arrive. Jake, armed with his own gun, points it at the trooper and orders him to the ground. The soldier complies. The entire incident is caught on camera, and before long, Quaritch is made aware of their escape. What this scene adds is more of Trudy kicking ass and more of the breakaway group's incarceration. This version shows that Trudy is not just a getaway pilot, she's also more than capable of holding her own in combat. An emotional scene is The Eye of 𝐿𝐴. It expands on the Na'vi's attempt to seek 𝐿𝐴's help in healing Grace. Both her human and avatar bodies are laid side by side beneath the Tree of Souls, while the 𝐿𝐴𝐷𝐼𝐴 gather in a circle, chanting and praying under Moat's guidance. Vivid imagery of nature, planets, and the sky can be seen. Then Moat suddenly halts the ritual. Grace stirs and whispers to Jake that she is with 𝐿𝐴 and that 𝐿𝐴 is real. Moments later, she loses consciousness. The camera slowly pulls back from above, revealing an image resembling an eye. Then Grace passes away. The Tree of Souls darkens. This is a crucial scene in our understanding of where Kiri comes from and also where Grace goes. In The Way of Water, we see some version of an afterlife when Kiri, also voiced by Sigourney Weaver, is with her mother after connecting to 𝐴𝐴 underwater. Back to the Sky People in You're a Long Way from Earth. Before launching the assault on the Na'vi, Quaritch rallies his troops with a pep talk about the massive devastation that they plan on causing to the surface of Pandora. Later, as they prepare their gear and machinery for war, 𝐿frij looks stressed. He walks around aimlessly, and when he sees the blasting compound being loaded, he gets furious. Immediately, he orders it sent back to the mine. 𝐿frij proceeds to confront Quaritch, furious that his mine workers have been turned into soldiers without his approval. The mission is out of control. Quaritch defends his position, saying that under threat condition red, everything is under his command. 𝐿frij still protests, but then Quaritch grabs him by the head and growls, "You're a long way from Earth." Intimidated, 𝐿frij backs down. Quaritch orders that 𝐿frij be escorted out of the area. The line delivered by Quaritch is both a warning and a power move. It reveals how, once violence becomes the chosen path, a corporation's profit-driven agenda can easily be replaced by brute force and military might. War Camp is the 23rd deleted scene. It shows a ritual performed before the war. At night, the 𝐏𝐚𝐬𝐧𝐞𝐝 gather around a campfire, dancing and playing music. Later, Jake and Trudy assemble Na'vi warriors. Trudy explains how to take down a helicopter, and Jake translates for her. Afterwards, as Trudy readies her weapons, she quietly admits to Jake that their chances are slim, as they're going up against machines with nothing but bows and arrows. Jake already understands, but he doesn't waver. Later, he walks alone to the Tree of Souls to pray. The pre-war ritual shown in this scene just adds even more to the depth of the Na'vi's lore, as well as giving us a closer connection to Trudy by seeing her with the Na'vi. Scene 24. Kick some blue ass. This scene takes place just after Jake and Neytiri share their intimate moment at the Tree of Souls before the battle. Quaritch's troops are marching in formation and boarding their aircraft alongside AMP suits. Quaritch himself is shown climbing into his gunship, ready for battle. From Hell's Gate, an officer signals the launch and says, "Let's kick some blue ass out there, gentlemen." The fleet then takes off, while 𝐿frij watches from afar, letting out a sigh. The full might of the RDA is on display here, as is some more nuance on Giovanni Ribisi's Parker 𝐿frij. He realizes the error of his ways fully by now. Wainfleet kills Norm. We're in the thick of the battle now. Jake tries to contact Sute and Trudy, but he gets no response. Meanwhile, from the aircraft, Quaritch orders his troops to advance. He wants scorched earth. The scene cuts to Norm on the ground, running and firing until he's shot in the shoulder. Norm reaches for his gun, but Wainfleet closes in and unloads fatal shots with his massive AMP machine gun. He mocks Norm with a sneer. "That didn't hurt." Norm's human body jolts awake from the link unit, gasping for air and writhing in pain. In the final cut, it's unclear who shot Norm's avatar, but this makes it explicit. It also clarifies why he wakes up in such pain. He wasn't just hit in the shoulder, he was shot directly in the heart by a gigantic gun. Neytiri kills Wainfleet is the next scene, and it begins with Neytiri confronting the Thanator, which unexpectedly becomes docile in her presence. She mounts the beast and directs it to attack Wainfleet. The Thanator overwhelms the AMP suit, shatters the screen, grabs Wainfleet, and slams him to the ground, killing him in an instant. This is different from the original cut, in which Wainfleet was killed by a hammerhead Titanothere. This is a more brutal version, shows even more why everyone loves warrior Neytiri and why the Thanator is such a terrifying creature. Scene 27. The Avatars attack. While the battle rages outside, the scientists at Hell's Gate take matters into their own hands. They break into the link unit room. Some rush to get into their link units. Others quickly set up the systems to operate them. Meanwhile, in the control room, 𝐿frij grows increasingly anxious. He demands an update on the battle from the soldiers, but they ignore him. Cut to the battlefield, where soldiers are overwhelmed by the rampaging animals. Desperate to escape, some cling to the departing helicopters, but they still end up losing their grip and falling, only to be mauled by viper wolves. Back in the control station, a massive bulldozer suddenly appears outside the windows. 𝐿frij peers out and sees Max behind the wheel. Max gives him a middle finger before driving the machine straight through the station, smashing it to pieces. Everyone runs in search of oxygen. This is a whole new Max we're seeing. Following from Max, avatars storm in with guns. They're the ones controlled by the drivers remaining in Hell's Gate. They shoot towards soldiers and order them to stay down. One of them approaches 𝐿fridge, who collapses into helpless pleading. His defiance is completely gone and he's helpless. Earlier in the film, 𝐿fridge exudes confidence and authority. But now, that authority is completely undermined. Scene 28. New Life. Finally, we reach the last deleted scene, which is set after the Na'vi have secured victory in the war. We see the humans being escorted to their ships to be sent home. Jake narrates, noting that 𝐷𝐴𝐴 is no longer needed. The scene then shifts to everyday life on Pandora. Na'vi children play happily, a mother tends to her baby, and a pregnant woman hunts. Jake and Neytiri are shown fishing together, and Jake places his hand on her stomach. Both of these moments foreshadow what's to come in Way of Water, as they build a family together and bond with their children fishing. The next shot shows Jake alone in the Link unit room, recording his final video log. In voiceover, he explains that this will be his last log, as he will never return to this place. He then exits the room. This scene emphasizes that peace has been restored on Pandora. Jake touching Neytiri's stomach foreshadows the arrival of their child, and it signals his full transition into a Na'vi, completing his journey and marking the conclusion of the first film. And that's every deleted scene in Avatar explained. We hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment to let us know what you think. There's plenty more to come as we build up to Fire and Ash.